Hello everyone! So welcome to my channel, Native Lady Book Warrior. My name is Kim and today I'm going to be showing you Indigenous literature, middle grade and children's reads that I own. Some of these I have not read, or actually probably most of them I have not read, but I do planning on reading them either pretty soon or close to next year. So welcome! Let's get started. Well, first, let me apologize for the light that is glaring off my glasses, my ring light. I was trying to get this video done while the sun was still up, but unfortunately I didn't make it. I had just had too much to do after I finished work, but I am here. Okay, so today, like I mentioned before, I'm going to be talking to you about Indigenous children's literature and middle grade reads that I own, that are in my household right now. And some of these reads I have read, others I haven't. That's okay because I'm going to be reading them real soon. First, I'm going to go over Indigenous children's literature that I have currently that I haven't read yet. And I have a few, but I have more middle grade reads than I do children's literature, which I need to change. So the first book that I have to show you today is Drum from the Heart by Louie. So I am so excited to read this book. I actually got this book as a gift from Neil Yazzie on Books, who is an Indigenous bookstagrammer, specifically Dene. So I cannot wait. I know this book definitely talks about the importance of not only the passing down of tradition, culture, and knowledge, but how all of that is transmitted through the power of song and ceremony. So within this book, a native boy, Ren, is gifted a drum from his mother. And from then on, he learns the songs that will be passed down to him. It very much, I imagine, really talks about the power of Indigenous knowledge and how the care and the love and also the teachings that are very much embedded in terms of Indigenous and their generational learning. So the beginning of this book, you'll see Ren. And I also want to mention that Ren is actually an Indigenous bookstagrammer. So you can find him on Bookstagram. I'll put all the information down below. But yes, definitely check this out. This is a new book. It just recently came out this year and I'm so happy and so excited to read it. And I'll also put down below how you can purchase this book, how you can get a hold of it. I also requested this book to be put at my library. So hopefully I'm waiting for that email pretty soon. So where this book can be checked out by others. Definitely check this out. So this is the first book that I'm showing you all. Yep. Oh, I forgot to mention. So Ren is Nuchala. I'm pretty sure I am not pronouncing that name right. I really wanted to ask Ren like how you pronounce where he is from, but it says Nuchala from Ausat, and his traditional name is Wikinaish, which translates to eldest son. So yeah, pretty awesome. It's really cool to actually see somebody that I know within the Indigenous bookstagram community make their own book. Is pretty amazing. So yes, check this out. Okay, so the second book that I have for you all is one that was actually gifted to me by the author. Yes, so Ancestor approved, Intertribal Stories for Kids. So I really didn't look up what the age range for this is, but if it says kids, I imagine it's children's to middle grade reads. And wow, there are a whole slew of Indigenous authors in here, including Joseph Bruchac, Christine Day, Eric Gansworth, Don Quigley, Rebecca Roanhorse, David A. Robertson, Cynthia Smith herself, also Tim Tingle, Brian Young, Monique Graysmith. Yes, there are tons of authors within this book. I know that there's also stories of Indigenous resilience and also the importance of contemporary cultural life within the Native community. So I love the cover of this book. The cover of this book is so incredible. But yeah, I can't wait to read this. This is something that I'm looking forward to. I'm thinking about probably reading this sometime in December because I just want to take my time with it. So December is definitely like a slow read month for me. So these stories were edited by Cynthia Leitich Smith, and I cannot wait to read this. So thank you, Cynthia, for this book. I can't wait to get to this. So this is book number 2 for Indigenous Children's Lit. I can't wait to talk about these next 2 books because the person who actually put me onto these books is actually a member of the Indigenous Bookstagrammer and reviewer community. But that person is Michelle from Thor Wants Another Letter. And she is constantly talking about Jojo Makoons. And I can definitely see why. I read like the first chapter of each of these books, and I don't know if they're in order, but I just kind of wanted to get a taste of Jojo Makoons. And Jojo Makoons is just this cute little like first grader or possibly second grader, and she's an Indigenous character. I heard she's just this fiery character that's so cute. And I think it's important also, I know a lot of Indigenous bookstagrammers and reviewers out there talk about this, but it's so important for Indigenous children to see themselves within literature. I cannot wait to read these. One is called Jojo Makoons Fancy Pants, and then the other one is called Jojo Makoons Used to Be Best Friend. So I can't wait to get to these. These are 2 books that you definitely should check out. Okay, so the next books that I'm going to be talking to you about, the rest of these books are actually middle grade reads. So I'm going to start with books that I have already read. And the first book that I've read that's an Indigenous middle grade read is by Joseph Bruchac. So he wrote Res Dogs, and this actually came out, I believe, in 2020 or 2021. So this is a very recent release. And this book came out at such an important time. I read this to my kids. It's in verse. It's written in verse. This book takes place during the pandemic. I think it's really important for just youth, but also Indigenous youth, to understand, like during the pandemic, when everything was happening, that they weren't alone. They weren't alone in experiencing those, the isolation, the disconnection from family, but also from culture. So, yeah, this book is so cool. I don't know what more to say about it, but other than like, Indigenous storytelling plays a huge part in this book. I mean, it's just really interweaved in this story, and I can see the characters so clearly, even though you don't have like a whole lot of pages in this book. Yeah, it was just so cool. It's incredible. I suggest you all check this out if you are looking for a middle grade read for Skoden Readathon. Yeah. Okay, so this next book I'm going to talk about, wow, it's such an incredible read. I believe I gave this book 5 stars, and when I talked about it like during a wrap up. And I think what's really cool about this book is my kids also definitely related to this book because their father is Diné or Navajo, and to hear them talk about just them relating to not only this boy, but also to culture and stories that they've heard. It's just an incredible read, and that book is Healer of the Water Monster by Brian Young. Brian Young is a Diné author, and wow, it's so good. This book just gave me so much. I think a lot of people have marked this book to be a magical realism book, but it's not. I think the best thing that I can come up with is it's not fantasy, but it's almost like a cultural realism book. It's very much oral traditional stories that have been passed down come to life in this book, and the adventures of Nathan and his connection to family and his grandmother's connection to family, and then their connection to land and culture. It's just such a really awesome thing to read about. The characters in this story are also so vibrant and just full of life. I don't know how many times I laughed in this book, and I also heard that there's going to be a second book to this one. But yes, this book is so good. And it's just about this boy who goes home to Navajo Nation, to Navajo lands, and he makes an excuse to do this science experiment because at the time his parents aren't together. I believe they're separated or divorced. And he just discovers this whole world around Indigenous or specifically Diné storytelling. And it's so good. Yeah. And he just gets into all these adventures. He tries to help this water monster. I just don't want to tell you anymore. If you want to know more about this book, I suggest you go and read it. But yeah, this is a highly recommended read. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so the next two books I'm going to show you are actually part of a series. I think this series is supposed to be 7 books, and I cannot wait because I read the first book. I enjoyed it. I don't remember the rating that I gave it. This author, David A. Robertson, does really well in this book, is able to blend just kind of like minor fantasy elements within cultural and Indigenous storytelling and oral traditions. And so The Barren Grounds is book 1 of the Masiwa series. And I really enjoyed it. One of the things that that really drew me into this story is that the characters that are right here on the page, which is Morgan and Eli, in the very beginning of this book, they are Indigenous foster children. That part of the story has such a strong beginning, but when you make your way through it, not only do you see them finding each other and becoming stronger family and siblings through their adventures, and also them trying to help this community when they go into another world. And I would say that this also has a little bit of similarity in terms of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So, but it's not the whole thing. It's just minor because the world that they go into is very much a part of, I imagine, Indigenous oral tradition and storytelling that is within the community, within this community. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to read the second one. And guess what? I have the second one. So the second one is called The Great Bear, book 2. And I don't even want to know what it's about. I kind of want to be surprised because I'm looking at this and it's not very long. I cannot wait to read this one. So there's another book that just came out this year. I believe it's called The Stone Child, but let me check really quick. The third book, I'm going to put it right here. The third book just came out this year. And I think it came out either in September or August, somewhere between there. So this book is called The Stone Child. And isn't this cover amazing? And well, all these covers are pretty amazing. But yeah, I just want to say that this series is pretty incredible. I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up owning like all of these books because these books are likely going to be read by my kids as well. So yes, I'm excited. I'm so excited to read the second one. Yeah, can't wait. Okay, so this next book, I actually, I can't remember who was talking about this next book. I believe it was also Michelle from Thor Wants Another Letter, but I also know Ashley from Bookish Realm talked about this book. And I got this book also from Cynthia Smith, and she sent this to me, and I cannot wait to read it. And that book is I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. So Indigenous author Christine Day also wrote several books, but I'm going to talk about one more that she wrote. But yes, this book also got the Youth Literature Award from the American Indian Library Association. I know this has to do with Indigenous children being adopted outside the Indigenous community. That I think you all should educate yourselves on is the Indian Child Welfare Act, or what Indigenous people also call ICWA. And it's a national legislation, and I could go more into depth, but I know this book, it talks about Edie, who is the character right here, who is adopted out, who has white adopted parents. But one day Edie discovers letters from, she believes, a woman named Edith in a photograph that looks exactly like her, who she assumes that is her mom. So I think there's a lot of complexity in here when it comes to families and the importance of Native children staying connected to their Indigenous communities and nations and culture. So I don't want to go any more than that, because even right now, I'm so trying not to look at the leaf for this book, but gosh, the art is so pretty, right? It's such a beautiful book, and I cannot wait to read this. I'm so excited to read this, and I just want to say you all should check this out as well. So this is Christine Day. So another book by Christine Day that I want to show you all is The Sea in the Winter. I believe this book just recently came out last year in 2021. One of the details in this story that I've heard from other reviewers and readers is that an Indigenous character named, I think her name is Maisie, gets hurt. And I think Maisie is an athlete. I think she is a ballerina, and she gets hurt. During this time, I think she's healing and recuperating, but she also, so this is like a homecoming story or a going home story. Maisie is from the Makoons community. I also think that this book probably will very much likely have themes of healing and courage and finding strength, but also finding strength in not only your family, but also within your culture, your Indigenous nation. I am excited to read this too. This looks so good. One of the things that I've heard about the author Christine Day is that they write really heartfelt stories, like stories that are contemporary, that really try to put Indigenous people in a contemporary limelight with not romanticized or a stereotypical like culture always being in the forefront, but definitely being part of the character's identity and background, and using that to move through a very Western contemporary world. So I just want to say that I cannot wait to read this, like I said before, but this is another book that you might want to check out, The Sea in the Winter. So the next book I'm going to talk to you about is written by a very prominent author, Indigenous author. I've read from this author, but I had no idea that this author wrote a middle grade book. And I got to check with that because I think this book is kind of like teetering between middle grade and YA. So I'm going to double check on that, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to classify it as a middle grade read. And that read is called The Birch Bark House by Louise Erdrich. And this book was published in 1999. It won several awards in 2000, but this follows a little girl named, I think, Omakayas. And that little girl is a 7-year-old girl existing in the mid 1800s, so like around 1850. So this book is a very strong cultural read, but it also introduces elements of how Indigenous populations were affected by non-Indigenous populations. And I don't want to spoil what that is. If you want to take a look at that, that little spoiler, because I don't want to give too much information. I know that this book is a very strong cultural read in terms of seeing what Indigenous life was like around then, especially with the coming of non-native settlers into the area. I can imagine there's probably going to be writing and experiences through this little girl about, like, why do we have to keep moving? You know, why does our land keep getting smaller? How come we can't go to this area? So I don't want to spoil it any more than that. But I know this book is the first of, I think, 5 books. So the second book is called A Game of Silence, and that was written in 2005. The third book I'll put right here is called Porcupine Year, and that book was published in 2008. The fourth book is called Chickadee, and that book was published in 2012. And then the last book, book 5, is called Makoons, which was published in 2006. So yes, I am definitely gonna get all those books, because I just feel like this first book I've heard starts out so strong and it just swims with it. So I cannot wait to read this pretty soon. Most likely maybe December next year. But yes, I was so happy to have found this in a used bookstore, and it's in really, really good condition. So I cannot wait to find the other 4 books within this series. This series is called the Birch Bark House series. So just the title of this first book. So yeah, check this out. Okay, so these next 2 books that I'm going to introduce to you, one is is more of a YA, like leaning towards YA than middle grade fiction. But I know that it's because it deals with some heavier themes than a middle grade book would. And this book is Rain Is Not My Indian Name by Cynthia Leitich Smith. And this book deals with themes of death, grief, also Indigenous contemporary life. So this book starts out with an Indigenous young character by the name of Cassidy Rain, who is dealing with some very hard times, specifically death, and of a person who is close to Cassidy. And they take on this assignment, this photography assignment to cover events, I think, at a local Indigenous camp, summer camp, I believe. So I think also that this book probably will introduce the reader to elements of photography. I think Cassidy becomes involved in a local newspaper. Yeah, I cannot wait to read this. It doesn't seem like a very long book. So I would, like I said before, I believe this is identified as a young adult read. Very strong themes in YA, but I imagine it's shorter in terms of middle grade. So yeah, just I'm not really sure like where to categorize this. I probably have to read it in order to make that more apparent and more straightforward. But yes, so this is just one I just want you all to put on your radar that I cannot wait to read as well. Okay, so the next book, which is also by Cynthia Leitich Smith, is Sisters of the Never Sea. And I believe this is a middle grade book, and it's just basically a Peter Pan retelling that is more diverse. And then there's also, I heard that there's an interesting twist in it. I heard an interview from Cynthia, and she was stating that why wouldn't like Indigenous characters be within a fantasy story? Like I said, the importance of representation and seeing oneself within a story that maybe might not always be connected to culture, right? I also believe Michelle from Thor Wants Another Letter said this book was pretty incredible, that they enjoyed it and it was such a fun read and they loved it. So I cannot wait to read this too. This is another book that you should put on your radar. So, okay. Wow, I am done. Here is my stack of not only recommended reads, but also reads that I own and that I really want to read sometime at the end of this year or possibly next. If you watched the entire video, I would love for you to put a cupcake emoji, because I'm like really feeling wanting a sweet right now so bad. But yeah, if you watch this entire video, put up a cupcake emoji and let me know, for instance, like out of this, maybe this pile, what Indigenous children's read or Indigenous middle grade read are you looking forward to reading? Or maybe put in the comments what Indigenous middle grade or children's read that you really enjoyed and you recommend that isn't here. So yeah, thank you so much for stopping by and for watching this video. I hope you are all well. I hope you are all safe, and I shall talk to you soon. So see you later. Bye.